That's the next one, CAL FIRE. You guys can handle CAL FIRE.
Well, I'm glad you at least stayed for the fraud part of the agenda we had.
You guys are mean to me.
The next item we have is number 13. This is to adopt two resolutions approving, one, the attached amendments to the cooperative agreement between the State of California, Department of Forestry, and Fire Prevention, CAL FIRE, and the County of Calaveras executed on June 9th, 2009 for dispatch services for the fiscal year 2009-10 in the amount of $206,803, and fiscal year 2010-11 in the amount of $215,548. And two, the attached three-year agreement between CAL FIRE and the County of Calaveras for dispatch services for fiscal year 2011-12 through fiscal year 2013-14 in an amount not to exceed $767,781. This is brought to us by Administration. Department Head Jeannie Boyce is signed, but I see we have Shirley Ryan in front of us.
Good morning, Shirley Ryan, County Administrative Office. This is what you have before you is two resolutions. The first resolution, as read, was to approve two amendments, 1 and 2, to an agreement that was entered into by the board in CAL FIRE on June 9, 2009. Historically, CAL FIRE has provided emergency fire dispatch services for the county, and for that we are charged a portion of that. They normally come back on an annual basis to bring us the amendments to the three-year contracts. Due to changes in the administration on CAL FIRE, there was a delay in getting that to us for fiscal years 9, 10, and 10, 11. Because the contract has a clause in it, we could continue with the contract under the initial year's amount for 9-10, which we did. Now that the contract is here, the balance due would be about $20,000. However, the final bill from CAL FIRE is actually in the neighborhood of $5,700. Also, the Second Amendment is for the current year, 10-11, and that is included in the budget, as well as the difference between what was paid in 9-10 and what remains to be owed. So we have sufficient funds in the current year budget to cover the dispatch contract. Also attached is a three-year agreement for the next three fiscal years, not to exceed $767,781. The first year is an actual number. The second two fiscal years are estimates. And we're actually billed based on actual cost. Division Chief Steve Hall is here from CAL FIRE. Should you have any additional questions for him, but I'll take any questions from the board initially.
Is there any questions from the board on this item?
Surely, is it not to exceed still, is that a fixed number, even though there could be changes in the yearly for year 2 and 3?
That's my understanding. The cost for 11-12 is $231,958, and that's based on what they know. It looks like there's, to me, a 10% cost of living built into the year for 12-13 and 13-14, but that is an estimate. I checked with Chief Hollett, and he told me that, as usual, it would be based on actual year's cost.
So that isn't a fixed amount?
No, it's not to exceed.
That's one of the things I got.
Okay. So it's really not, it's an estimated not to exceed.
Right.
So should we modify the resolution to estimated? Because not to exceed, I can hear us in year 3 saying, they want to, 770, and then we're going to spend 2 hours arguing about it and going to special meetings and so forth. So, I thought we should deal with that now.
Okay, maybe the best person to answer that is Chief Hollett. He can tell us whether he would expect it to go over that.
Chairman, Steve Hall at CAL FIRE. And that figure is, won't go over that number there. We went high just to make sure we had it in the contract, but it's going to be actual cost for that.
Okay, so if there's a change, either because of volume of calls or because the cost of doing business is exceeded what is before us, the 767 is the maximum, no matter what other variables might happen to exceed that.
Yes, that's true, and that's stated in the contract.
Okay, I mean, I just don't want it to become an issue in year 3. That's where I'm going with that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just kind of want to go back in time. We had a lot of discussion 5 years ago or whenever, I think Shirley reviewed it in terms of the staffing, and there was quite a bit of discussion on what kind of staffing that we were paying for.
Correct, and they have the staffing requirements for the dispatch center. And what we had realized a number of years ago was that the cost of dispatch was never looked at in relationship to the number of calls by CAL FIRE within itself, Calaveras County, Alpine County, and Tuolumne County. So we've asked for a review of that every 5 years, and we have received that, and we're still within the parameters of the percentage of the overall operating cost of the emergency center. We also at that time looked at the possibility of the Sheriff's Department doing dispatch for fire and emergency.
Thank you.
And it was looked at very carefully by then Sheriff Downham. And one of the concerns was it was really cost prohibitive to bring that back into the county for a number of reasons. Personnel, obviously, additional dispatch stations required, but most significantly was the purchasing of the frequencies needed to dispatch fire and emergencies.
Okay.
Yes, Steve?
On that question, and given the need to do long-term planning and the fact that we're building a facility over here, I would believe that maybe there's some cause for us to take a look at this again in the current situation, see what we might do in relation to putting some of that technology in anyway, just because it's smart to update yourself when you build new facilities. But certainly the space, right now we're limited for space. It would cost money to bring in a certain number of dispatchers for that, although the amount of cost by the end of this contract looks like it would pay for almost 5 full-time equivalents, and the question is how many FTEs are needed for this work and whether that meets that aspect. If we're going up at the rate of higher than inflation over a long stretch of time, is what's our long-term prospect here, and should we be planning to bring this back in or find a balance in this relationship? If all the calls come into our dispatch and then we're contacting the other dispatch, I'm also not sure that that's the most efficient transaction that we can have, and I know that there have been at least some calls that got a little bollocksed in the transaction. So I just wonder what our current thinking is on this. Should we move forward in this next 3 years, what will we do in the interim to prepare for something that might bring some cost and programmatic efficiencies to this? And that's on all. I'm asking the question to actually all parties on this, because I'm sure, because I've heard from CAL FIRE personnel that the current situation sometimes is the transaction is, or maybe might look like the U.S. Olympic relay team. The time gets dropped on occasion. I think it's by and large we've had very good support and very good people working this, but our system may not facilitate that as to best outcome. So what say the parties on that, and what should we be doing about it as policymakers?
I mean, it's something that certainly can be looked at now that we're looking at a new dispatch center, but under the current system, we really need CAL FIRE to continue with that.
No, I'm not debating that at all. I'm trying to figure out what we can include in our thinking currently to not just make this our own, a reactive piece of it, but that we do something proactive to get to where both parties would like to see the communications.
Steve Hall at CAL FIRE again. I think you should do that. I think that's a wise move. The 3-year contract there's times of an essence with that one. It takes a long process to get through, and the starting date is July 1st of this year. So, but I think it's wise to look beyond that. I think that's a smart move. CAL FIRE does more than just dispatching, though, for the county. We do quite a bit. I can let you know some of that, but we do a lot more things that, maybe behind the scenes sort of thing, that you get a little bit more than just somebody calls about a medical and we have somebody come out and monitor that call. We work with the Sheriff's Department quite a bit on search and rescue issues, 4th of July parades, and dispatching issues for those sorts of things. And there's quite a few other things that we do that maybe need to be understood. But certainly, I think the future would be wise to do that. That would be my thinking.
Well, I hope my comments have not been misunderstood to be critical of CAL FIRE. You guys have done tremendous work in my district and certainly continue to work with our agencies. But sometimes I think that we need to joint plan the future together, especially given the new facility and how we integrate things into it.
Right. You would need somebody to be in charge of the calls, and then you could work on support. And we certainly could work with you to set up your own system. We could have folks come by and help you along with that process too over the next 3 years. So we'll gladly do that for you too.
You're most welcome.
Chief, is there any discussion of doing a joint facility again?
I haven't heard that in a while.
Well, that's kind of where I was, why wouldn't we use this moment to merge operations and have one call instead of two? Why we have the technology available, potentially, we have the joint capabilities, and it might result in a net savings to both agencies.
Mm-hmm. And there could be a transition period over the next 2 years.
Exactly, this would be our time to do
3
it.
years.
Certainly.
Any other board comments? You have any?
Yes, I do. I have a big problem with number 1. There's 2 resolutions for us to vote on here, and I'm making a motion to split those 2 apart because I have some extreme reservations with the first part. So if we could split those into 2 different votes, I'd certainly appreciate that, and I make a motion to do so.
Any other board comments at this time? No? If not, I'll open up to public comments.
Council Gallup Textile Association. We agree with Shirley and also CAL FIRE. This seems to be the best way to do it. We can have wide changes in cost depending on whether we have a major fire or something like that. The cost could be great, or if we have a year or 2 where there's hardly any major fire problems, then there'd be quite a bit of savings, because the way this seems to be set up is the cost is not to exceed, which means that we assume they use good management, and the cost could be quite less than the amount figured here. If we, as Marita suggested, if we went to a cost estimate, it's almost like going time and materials with a contractor. You're committed in advance an unknown amount, and a cost estimate would have very little meaning because the county's already committed by contract to it being just an estimate. So I think in practically everything that you do of this nature, you should have cost not to exceed. Thank you.
Any other public comments? If not, I'll bring it back to the board. There's a motion on the floor to separate both resolutions. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay. We will separate, the motion on the floor is to separate. You want to read this through? We will separate the 2 resolutions, the one approving the attached amendments between the state Department of Forestry and Fire Prevention in Calaveras County executed on June 9, 2009 for dispatch services for fiscal year 2009-10 in the amount of $206,803 and fiscal year 2010-11 in the amount of $215,548. That would be one that we are going to separate, and then the second one where the current year going into fiscal year 2013-14.
Shirley, the resolution says 767 on the first one, it should be 608.
On the resolution itself?
Yeah. I mean, it's just a minor error.
Okay, I can make that correction.
Yeah, just for the original for Gary's signature. Thank you.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Mr. Spellman, since it was your motion to separate them, you want to talk about resolution number 1?
Yes, sir. I'd like the board, my colleagues here on the board and those in the public audience and the media to recognize we just had a vote in which the Board of Supervisors voted 4-1 to give money back to somebody based on County Council's opinion that it was legally necessary to do so. And that comes out of, when you're addressing legal matters, you look at what you shall and shall not do, supposedly according to contract law. What we have before us today in this first resolution as part of this agenda item is a contractual, actually a dysfunctional contractual issue. The County Board of Supervisors approved for the 2008-2009 fire season an amount of $186,467, of which we paid that. The county also paid in 2009-10 and 10-11. We were contractually obligated to pay the same amount, $186,467. Now, if the cost exceeded that amount that we gave as contractually that we would be obligated to pay, then it was in the event that we went over that, CAL FIRE needed to come to us, give us their revised estimates for services actually rendered. And here in the staff report it says, normally the state's amendments to this agreement for fiscal year 9-10 and fiscal year 10-11 would have been brought to the board during the affected year of service. But CAL FIRE has undergone several changes in the administration of the Tuolumne Calaveras unit, causing a delay in forwarding the amendments to the county. So, since CAL FIRE should have brought these amendments to us 2 years ago, here we are 2 years later, and they're asking us to give them $20,336 for the 09-010 year, and for the 10-11 year, the total actually performed was $215,548 against what we contracted to give them, which was $186,467, and then you have a difference in that year of $29,081. So if you take the 2 years, 09-010 and 10-11, for the money that they should have asked for much long ago, they should have brought that forward to the board. That's a total of $49,417 that CAL FIRE is asking us to retroactively reimburse them for something they should have submitted to us 2 years ago, as far as the first part of that funding goes. So, if logic holds true, if this board and county council said that we have to give $36,000 back to Black Creek LLC because we're contractually obligated, okay? The same holds true for CAL FIRE. CAL FIRE was contractually obligated to give us their amended budget on a certain time, and they haven't. So if they haven't, I'm sorry, it's not a problem. That's $49,000 that we can use in our budget to fund our sheriff's department and other various things that need funding. And you know what? Right now, when we're down to nickels and we're looking at cutting more jobs, this is something, I am looking at every single thing that comes before this board. And if there's anything that I can scrape together to save money, to keep people employed, to keep services that are vital to this county, I'm going to do it. And I'm asking that the board deny this back pay, because CAL FIRE has not met their contractual obligation. We're meeting our contractual obligation to Black Creek LLC, despite my, adverse reactions to that. So I would ask that this board and council also follow the same guidelines they just voted for and deny CAL FIRE due to their contractual obligation that they defaulted on, which was giving us the amended budgets in a prompt time that they should have, but they didn't. And so if we approve giving this money back pay to CAL FIRE, it's nothing against CAL FIRE. The world operates on contracts, and these people just voted against me, showing that they're in favor of contracts, which is giving back Black Creek LLC their money because we contractually have to. So the same could be said for CAL FIRE. They're contractually obligated, they defaulted on their obligations, and so therefore we are under no obligation to pay them back for those previous 2 years in the amount of $49,417. To me, $49,417 equals somebody on the staff of this county that doesn't have to get laid off. It's nothing against CAL FIRE. I think they do a great job, but we live in an adult world. In an adult world, we have contracts. And I'm willing to debate contracts. But like I said, on the previous motion, people voted 4-1 against me in favor of keeping the contract. So if that's their case, they want to keep contracts, show the same integrity and tell CAL FIRE that they need to keep their contracts, and we'll keep our $49,000, and that'll be a lesson for them moving into the future, that they need to get things to us under the obligated contract time frame.
Steve? I guess that leads me to a number of questions, but my reading of this at least involves perhaps a different perspective that CAL FIRE might bring, which is that at a point where a contract lapses, it would be possible for a partner, a long-standing partner like Caltrans, to maybe legally withdraw services in that mode under contract law. And I don't know whether that applies to this.
But it's Caltrans.
Right here, excuse me, not Caltrans, CAL FIRE. My apologies. It would apply to them too, I suppose. But what I find important to this deliberation is that CAL FIRE stepped up and continued to provide services despite the fact that the parties had not updated or extended, and that we had some obligation in good faith not to either to refuse the services or to negotiate in good faith to come up with a result, the nature of which is before us. And my worry is that if we become strict constructionists on all sides of all relationships, that we wind up putting a great number of people at risk. CAL FIRE stopped some potentially catastrophic fires last 2 years in my district, for instance. If they had been real strict about whether we have these agreements in place or not, they could have said, oh, well, let's stay in the station. I don't want that kind of relationship developed with such critical partners. And my question to you is, were these services provided despite the fact that the T's weren't crossed and I's dotted? And is this an accurate reflection of the actual cost of those services or not?
Yes, the services have been continued to be provided by CAL FIRE. Under the original agreement, it stated that they could continue for a year. They have obviously continued past that and continued providing our services.
Were they obligated under agreements with our county that were updated? They were not for the second year, correct?
That's correct.
All right. So
why
did they not, if they didn't have a contract, I would ask this to Steve. If you didn't have a contract obligating you, why did you provide the services anyway? This is somewhat abstract, but probably worth bringing up given the conversation at hand.
We already know.
I guess I'd say it was the right thing to do. We had folks at risk, and we knew that was our obligation to take care of those folks, to make sure they got proper dispatch to their emergencies and medical situations. So we knew that was the right thing to do, and the right thing for the citizens to do, so we continue to do that.
You do fire and medical
Medical, both.
emergencies, correct?
And handle dispatchers.
And the one thing I did want to mention is that for Amendment 2, we are in the current affected year. So by approving the contract,
what?
we are in the current affected year for Amendment 2. In Amendment 1, as I mentioned, even though the total amount of the contract is $28,000 more than the prior year, the final bill I have from CAL FIRE for the last quarter, actual cost that has not been paid, is actually $5,694.16.
In other words, we haven't really separated the retro from the future because one falls twixt the twain, and the second piece of this fiscal year is covered under Measure 2 here.
I guess I have a couple questions, Shirley, concerning the amendments here. When CAL FIRE approaches you with the amendments for the additional costs, how are they handled? I mean, are they spelled out? They give you all documentation?
Yes,
other than what was provided here, where it showed the number of calls? I mean, does it show work? Does it show pay increases, whether they're COLAs or whether they are longevity increases, or how do we determine? Because some of this is based on some formula that was given for additional costs, and I'm just interested in how that's given to us.
They provide an Exhibit D, Schedule A, a breakdown of the costs, what the personnel costs are, what the operating costs are, and what the benefits are. And you can compare from year to year what those mean. They also provided us, after the board packet was together, a scheduled cost analysis of the dispatch center, what the percentage of, the number of calls by county, and what the costs are, and it's a breakdown to ensure that the percentage ratio for each county is related to the calls.
So are we paying, I guess this question would be for Steve, when you give us these estimates that you have, and this probably pertains more to item number 2 here, the second resolution, are we paying for FTEs? In other words, are we paying for one full-time employee around the clock, 24/7? And so you're basing your estimates on those costs?
We're paying for, Steve Hall and CAL FIRE, we're paying for a comm operator, 2.4 comm operators for the year, and that gives us 12 hours a day and some overlap days. So additional hours through the week, but essentially it's 12 hours a day. A little bit about the cost increase recently. I think it was 05, 06, I think. We recently moved our dispatcher clerks up to the level of a CHP dispatch position, which is called comm operator. That was an increase of pay, and what you've seen, a lot of those increases have been step increases over the last 5 years, which end July 1st, 2011. So some of those increases have been bringing our comm operators, which were dispatch operators, up to a higher level of pay, more reflective of what they do. They're all risk dispatchers. They do a lot of complicated, complicated work that would be more equal to what a CHP dispatch would get. So you're seeing some of those costs that have been step increases, and those step increases, all our folks will be top step by the end of this fiscal year. Some of the other increases have been retirement benefits and those sorts of things, but the reason you've seen those increases from 08 to 9 to 10 to now 11 is that the change in their classification.
I have one other question while you're up there. Given the fact of what transpired, if at the beginning of the fiscal year last year, previous year, when the contract had ended, could you, by law or by right, if you wanted to, just say we're done and walk away from it, and then the county would have the problem? I mean, is there anything obligating you to continue the service by law or anything else?
No, I don't believe there would be.
the contract ended, we're done until we get a new contract, but you decided to continue with providing the service because of the vitality needed by the county for those services.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
They can't legally just walk away if there's a fire.
Any other board comments or questions?
I have a question for county council. It's my understanding that CAL FIRE is in a position, and they've taken a sworn oath to protect the community and the citizens of this state, being that it's a state organization. I don't believe that they have the legal right to walk away regardless of whether or not they're being remunerated or not. That's question number one. Question number two, do we have a legal obligation contractually to back pay when these people have not fulfilled their requirement?
I don't know how to answer the first question. I think I can't answer the first question. I don't think it's a legally enforceable obligation to say that the duty to protect the public is all-encompassing. So I can't answer that.
Could you, if I might, I'd like to put a little detail on the question. There's something before us that deals with dispatch and other particular services that's part of this agreement. And it is those specific things, I think, that the question refers to. They have an overall California obligation in terms of public safety. Do they have an obligation to continue to serve the county in the dispatch function and other things outlined in this agreement?
The function actually that I was referring to is if there was a skirmish in Clements or Lockford per se, and they called on Calaveras County to add force to that for our sheriffs to go and help out in Lockford, it's just past Wallace, outside our borders. But we do have an obligation, our peace officers have an obligation to respond to that, regardless of whether or not they believe that they're going to be paid by San Joaquin County. They have an obligation to respond. The same way that CAL FIRE has an obligation to respond if there is an event where lives are at risk. Regardless of whether or not they know they're going to get paid, they have an obligation to respond.
I think you're talking about moral obligations.
Public safety.
I deal in legally enforceable obligations, and I guess the answer to your question is that the general duty to protect the public does not form the basis for a legally enforceable obligation. You couldn't go into court and allege a breach of that duty because of the failure to provide a dispatch service. So.
Also, I want to clarify, they're not just dispatching CAL FIRE, they are dispatching all our fire districts.
Steve brought up the dispatch. That wasn't part of my question.
Okay, I was trying to bore down into what was before us here.
I was talking about responding. I would argue that if there was a fire and CAL FIRE was available and they chose not to respond, they would have liability.
But this isn't about fire, this is just dispatch.
This is dispatch services.
Dispatch services.
Yes. Okay, I think that's correct. The second question, refresh me on the second question.
Do we have a contractual obligation, or because of the contract that we have with CAL FIRE, are we legally required to back pay them for what appears to be a breach in contract where they should have given us amended fiscal updates, but they did not? So does that, because they formed a breach in that contract by not fulfilling their end of it, does that require us to pay them back, or can we choose to not pay accordingly because of the breach?
Okay, I wouldn't use that term. The fact that they continue to provide the service doesn't amount to a breach of a contract. The board memo doesn't use the term, but what the board is being asked to do here is to ratify what's happened in the past, to actually approve retroactively what's going on because of the fact that the service was provided. The board has that authority. You have the authority to ratify this agreement, and that's essentially what you're being asked to do. You have that authority. It's up to the board.
So we also have the authority to not ratify it based on the fact that they did not fulfill their agreement, which was that they would give us an amended fiscal report.
You have that authority to not ratify it. I don't know what effect that would have to do with the overall negotiation and going forward, but you have the authority to ratify it or not, to approve it or not approve it.
Okay, that ends the conversation we've had. Do I hear a motion?
Al had something, public comments?
Well, I thought we opened it.
I got my answer to my question from the CAL FIRE. Apparently, those previous agreements did have a not-to-exceed figure, and they exceeded the figure, so Supervisor Spellman's probably correct in that those are two modifications that should have been done at that time, but by apparent mistake was overlooked, and so they're asking to correct the mistake. So I think the taxpayers would think that it's probably proper to go ahead and correct the error.
Marty Crane.
Marty Crane, Valley Springs Rancho. I just find it interesting that, well, first of all, my home was a bullseye in the middle of the 2006 Patterson fire, and I am here today in great part because of CAL FIRE. I applaud you, thank you. I would hate to think that because of administrative changes and a ball got dropped or a paper didn't get filed or an amendment wasn't brought forward in a timely fashion, that they would have said, forget it, just let it burn. I also find it interesting that Supervisor Spellman, you're talking about adamantly scraping together every penny to save us from ruin, financial ruin here in Calaveras County, which is something we are all looking at. When last week we saw fit to throw away $70,000 that would have had major impact just so that we could maybe take a poke at Delta College, which we could have dealt with in another arena, but we threw a lot of people under the bus without watching who they were and what they were about to benefit from. And so I just find, and also the funds that we would have spent, we are now probably going to have to spend from the general fund for the survey that Habitat for Humanity might have been able to help us with. So those funds are not recoverable. So once again, we waste $1 to save a dime. And in this case, who are we? As people, as citizens, what kind of character do we have? If they provided the service and it was service that we absolutely needed and it saved lives, then why aren't we going to address that? So, thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, bring it back to the board.
If it's, the money, addressing Ms. Crane's comments, the money from last week with the Delta College deal and other things, that didn't affect anybody that's employed in this county. That money did not affect anybody in the county government's employment. No, it did not. It did not.
Okay.
Okay. That was something else. Okay. The other thing, you people have a real gall to try to twist these things. I'm trying to keep jobs in this county. I'm trying to support our county. And at the drop of a hat, everybody here is willing to throw money down the drain. We're willing to give money to somebody who owes us $147,000 in bankruptcy. We're willing to give them $36,000 out of our budget, okay? But when we have, at the same hand, when somebody's broken their contractual obligation to us, we see no problem with giving them the money. And if you think that this organization, I don't have anything against CAL FIRE, I'm fully in support of fire, police, other efforts for community safety. But a contract is a contract. And if you're saying that we should pay them this money in retrospect when they've broken their contract with us because they provided a service, then the first person I'm going to talk to when I leave this room today is Sheriff Kuntz. And I'm going to tell him to provide the service that's necessary to keep this county safe. And if he racks up bills because there's extra hires that need to be hired in the sheriff's department to keep our county safe, we'll use that same logic. And if we have to cut any number of things to pay for it, then so be it. If that's the way that this board works, in the way that these people in this audience want to proceed, then I'll let Sheriff Coons know, if he's not already aware after I leave this meeting, that he can do whatever he needs to do to make sure that our county is safe. Because that's what I'm hearing. These people have provided safety for our county through CAL FIRE services, even though it was a breach of contract because they spent in excess of what we said they could spend, and they're asking for retroactive payment. So, if that holds true for CAL FIRE, it should also hold true for the Calaveras County Sheriff's Department. Because I believe that the Sheriff's Department and the service and protection they provide is equal, if not greater, than the services and protection provided by CAL FIRE.
Okay, do I hear a motion?
I motion to deny resolution number 1, unless there's anybody that has anything they'd like to add to it to try to justify why we would give them that money back when we don't have to contractually. County Council is giving an opinion that we do not have to do that. We have the authority to not give that money back.
Do I have a second? Motion has died for lack of a second. Do I hear another motion?
Yes, I make the motion to approve the first portion of this resolution and meet our obligations to an organization that has been a good partner, has fulfilled duties beyond their contractual obligations in this interim period of difficulty on both sides, by the way, I might add. And I'm pleased that we can at least have the opportunity today to meet those obligations and move forward.
I have a second.
Yeah, second. And surely you'll just make that one typo change. Thank you.
So motion-
I'll second.
Motion still stand with that change?
It does.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
The motion passes 3-1. Supervisor Spellman in the negative. We go on to item number 2. Have any board
Okay,
comments?
now, I move this item on the amount not to exceed per the chief.
Do I hear a second?
I will second this with an understanding, or I should say with a hope, that administration and CAL FIRE can develop over the next couple of years a long-range plan that can create interagency efficiencies and utilize the opportunities presented by our new facility.
So you want the amendment changed?
I'm not asking
I mean, the
amendment-
resolution
No,
changed?
I'm not asking that the resolution be changed. I'm asking that the parties be advised of the conversations that we've had here today and act accordingly in follow-up, especially with CAL FIRE's generous offer to work with us on that.
Wait a minute, Steve, do you want to leave
My
the resolution?
motion is to leave the resolution as is, but I want to
Okay.
be clear about my feelings about what needs to happen next.
Okay. I support the resolution as presented.
Is there any, so that's a second. We have a motion by Supervisor Walensky, a second by Supervisor Callaway. Is there any further board discussion?
I'll say that I'll vote in the affirmative to approve this measure, and I second what Supervisor Walensky said, that it would be my hope that there would be work in collaboration with the Sheriff's Department in terms of dispatch possibilities in the near future.
And since I opened it up for public comment on the previous one, is there any public comment?
I'm old and I can't remember things so well. Is the motion,
Your name is Al.
my name is Al Sabah, Calaveras County Taxpayer Association. And the question I have, are we changing the wording in an amount not to exceed to something more vague?
No.
No, that remains the same.
Thank you.
Any other further public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Before I call for the vote, I have one question of Jeannie Boyce. Jeannie, under the current proposal for the governor's budget, is there a measure in there to freeze salaries at the current rate for the next fiscal year?
For all state employees?
Yeah.
I do not know the answer to that.
You don't?
I'll have to look at that.
I think so, actually.
I mean, I know they haven't had any type
Now, whether it's been
of...
passed or not, I
Right,
don't know.
and each
but-
bargaining unit has different agreements, and
right.
so depending on
I think it's been indicated as an intention, but it is subject to the collective bargaining process.
Right.
And that's why it's not yet.
To my knowledge, I'm not aware of any state employees getting raises. I'm sure maybe Steve could tell us, but,
How about longevity increases?
oh,
It's all negotiated.
it's all negotiated as part of the bargaining process,
But
yeah.
I think it's part of the proposal to go forward in negotiations with those. So with that understanding that that occurs, and there are some give-backs by state employees groups, and if the CAL FIRE is one of those, that this contract would reflect that we would not see the increases of 10% that we're showing here as increases.
Right, because we only pay the actual cost, so if their costs are reduced, our costs would be
I
reduced.
suppose to make that,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
all right. So, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Seeing none?
Wait, Gary, I have a question outside of this for the...
Sure.
Steve. See, I have a question, Chief, on, it's not this, what's occurring on the SRA areas? Do you anticipate a change in the state responsibility areas?
That the governor had mentioned
Right.
before.
No, okay, that's fine.
Hard for me to
That's
comment on that. I know it's a high priority, it's a priority, but I understand it wasn't pushed forth like the other ones were. But I still think it's a it's there, but I don't think it has the same force that it did a little bit ago.
Good, thank you.
Well,
Thank you,
Steve.
Chief.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 14. This is a minute order approving a change order to ACOM in the amount of $25,561 for assessment of an expanded area of potential impact required by U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And this is brought to us by Mr. Doug Evans.
Thank you. Doug Evans with Kitchell. As part of the environmental approval process, the Corps of Engineers is requiring the county and our consultants to expand the study area. The initial, what they call the area of potential impact, was the jail site and the property immediately adjacent to the jail site. But by adding the roadway and the improvements that we're going to make to Mountain Ranch Road to connect the new roadway into Mountain Ranch Road, the Corps is requiring an expanded study area. And the purpose of this amendment is for AECOM to conduct that the study of that expanded area. There's 4 or 5 parts to this. The first is to conduct a jurisdictional wetland study of that area and interact with the Corps of Engineers with relationship to that wetland study. To amend the Section 404 Nationwide 39 permit application, and again to interact with the Corps. To amend the 401 Regional Water Quality certification application and to coordinate with Regional Water Quality. To amend the Department of Fish and Game's 1602 Streambed Alteration Agreement and coordinate with the Department of Fish and Game as necessary. And to revise the biological assessment and to deal with the Corps and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in relationship to the biological assessment. The reason we're going to AECOM and not trying to go outside to some other agency to do this is that the Corps is requiring the initial study be expanded, and there's really no viable other way to approach this. This is a requirement that the Corps is putting on the project that we have to do in order to get their approval and get these various permits that I just mentioned.
Okay, any board questions on this item? Yes, Supervisor Spellman.
I would like to know, since AECOM, in their professional responsibility, cost the county $17,000 for the elderberry bush issue, which we negotiated down to $12,500, I believe, was the final number. If it is that AECOM is going to conduct this work and they're asking for $25,000 to do so, I would like to know if it would be the will of the board to approach them to help offset some of the costs that we ate in that $12,500 the last time that we used their services. They're asking us again for $25,000. The county had to shell out $12,500 in regards to the elderberry bush issue the last time they did work for us on this project. I'd like to see them put forth a fig leaf, if you would, as a show of good effort to, if they're going to continue to do business with us, that they would once again recognize the default the last time that they were in our employ and give us a discounted price on this particular project.
Yes, Steve?
I would try to ask this question before moving into that realm. Didn't we make them eat a good portion of their expenses on the elderberry thing by negotiating it from 20-some thousand down to 12? I worry we're asking them to double eat. What's your comment?
We did do that with PSA Dewberry, yes.
PSA Dewberry.
Right, okay, but they were contracted by this group.
Yes.
Dewberry took the responsibility. AECOM's the one that was responsible. Dewberry was responsible financially, but maybe AECOM could show some goodwill by reducing the cost in this particular one, because it wasn't them that took the hit. It was Dewberry actually.
I'd like to respond. There's two components there. First of all, we need to go back to what originally happened. Because AECOM didn't want that the Corps of Engineers would make a decision one way or the other. They gave us an opinion based upon historical information and they're professional in this field, but they can't want what the Corps of Engineers is going to do. And we understood their advice, we took their advice, we moved in that direction, and the Corps of Engineers chose to look at it a different way. I don't think you can blame a consultant for giving you that opinion, which is a valid opinion, and the Corps of Engineers choosing to go in a different direction. The other concern I have is any delay to this item, because we've got to get these permits in place in order to begin construction. And I'm concerned that if we have to go back and spend weeks renegotiating this and bringing it back to the board, it's going to jeopardize the bids that we have in place. It's going to jeopardize our ability to start construction before the winter months come in. So I'm very concerned about any delay to this. I'm sorry to interrupt, I wouldn't have any problem going back and perhaps having some kind of a discussion with AECOM. I don't know exactly what it would be. I'd have to look through their proposal a little bit and see if there's some opportunity to tighten it up in some manner, but my concern is delaying this at all. It's huge.
Well, let me put it in perspective for those who don't usually listen to these type of hearings. There's people that may be here for the first time today or maybe watching at home these proceedings, and to them, they're not privy to all the knowledge that you and I and the rest of this board are. To them, let me give an analogy. You're saying that we're hiring them. We hired them originally because they are a consultant, and we hired them for their professional opinion. That's no guarantee that it would be accepted by the Army Corps, which it was not. We had to make a revision. Now, in layman's terms, for someone that may not be familiar with these proceedings, to put it in their realm, if they hired someone to do their taxes as a professional tax consultant, they chose to use that professional tax consultant's advice, and they ended up getting audited and had to pay thousands of dollars because that advice was not, although it couldn't be guaranteed and wasn't guaranteed, caused them, the net effect for that person was the advice they took from their tax consultant cost them thousands of dollars personally. So if it were that they even gave that tax consultant a second chance to be able to work for them, I would assume that that tax consultant would be glad to have the opportunity to try to make up for what turned out to be a faulty decision based on their opinion. And so I think that most people could understand that, having paid taxes and knowing that some of them do have tax preparers, and tax preparers can make mistakes. It's a fact of life, and it's a risk, just like these people have taken a risk. They're giving a professional opinion. But in moving forward, just as the personal taxpayer, if they even return to that tax advisor, would assume that that person would give them some kind of a discount and just kind of a good faith opportunity to win back their business based on the unpredictable outcome of their opinion. And so I think that AECOM, as being contracted by this county, they make no reservations about their opinion, whether or not it'll be accepted, and that's perfectly fine. It's within the professional realm. However, I think that it might be a sign of goodwill to the people of this county who pay the taxes, who pay that bond for this jail to be built, that these people would show good faith in that while their decision last time in their professional opinion is not guaranteed, that because they cost the county $12,500, no matter what the original bill was, it ultimately cost $12,500 more for their opinion. And so I would hope that they would make some concession in showing good faith that they are willing to reduce the amount that they're asking this time to try to make amends.
I've got a couple of comments. I think it's not a bad analogy, actually, using the taxpayer analogy, but I think it's more like the tax consulting firm says, you can take this deduction or not. If you take this deduction, it's going to save you a certain amount of money. And we wanted to take that deduction because it made our project a little better with regard to designing in relationship to the elm tree. But it was our decision to take that deduction, not with a guarantee from our tax preparer, to use your analogy, that it's going to get through the IRS, with an opinion that it probably would. And when it didn't, we made that decision, or the county made that decision as the owner of the project, but was fully advised in making that decision. Also, AECom has provided some additional services for the county with, this will be the third time the wetland delineation map is being revised. The second revision, they didn't charge us for it. They didn't put that on the bill. So they have actually done some good faith effort, and our displeasure from the prior interactions with AECom was conveyed, the board's displeasure was conveyed back to AECom. So,
Any other board comments? If not, I'll open it up to the public. Any public comment?
Peter Ray, Rancho Calaveras. I don't know if you folks are aware of it, but just from being a dumb person in the audience, don't you guys get tired of this last-minute emergency stuff coming to you and all that? You have to do it and so on. You guys pay some pretty good money for these folks, and I'm sure they well deserve it. But if they were aware of it, did they notify you guys that you might have to do it? I mean, they're the professionals, and the last-minute issues coming up, I know it's just privilege stuff, $24,000, $50,000, $100,000 is not a big deal for you, but you pay good money to be kept up to date. But these constantly, certain issues, you don't do it by such tomorrow or next day, you're going to lose the grant, or you're going to lose money, forget it, pass it, and you read about it later. This is not a health bill, folks. You got professionals to get you guys up to date. If you don't demand that, the taxpayer should demand it. Let them get on the ball and get things up to date, on time, so you have sufficient time to consider these issues. It's all these constant add-ons. Don't you folks get tired of it? As a taxpayer, as I do, maybe some other people get. Either you guys know what you're doing, or get somebody, hire somebody who will tell you what to do. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Al Segal, Calaveras County Taxpayer Association. When the county contracts with people, the people that bid on those contracts have to have assurance that the county's going to honor its agreement. Okay? If the agreement provides some special warranty or guarantee of results, well, that's one thing. Then there can't be any overages. The contractor or the person that's doing the work has to take a loss, perhaps. But when the contracts do not have that sort of provision, the assumption is when you hire a professional, you're assuming that the professional is not perfect, that they sometimes make mistakes, and that the consequences of the mistakes, unless the consequences were in design or something like that, are borne by the owner. An architect makes a mistake, he advises his client to grow ivy. So this came before the board before, it's a good point. But under all of this is the question of overregulation. Think about it. Look at the list of things that have to be approved by these government departments. And if we ask each one, is that really needed? Well, the answer usually would be no, but it's written, and we do it. How much of expense is chewed up by unnecessary regulation? A lot of it's coming from the federal government, some from the state. And it'd be nice to be able to quantify that and then approach our representatives, which is the proper way to do it, I think, and ask for relief. In the case of the federal government, we could ask them to simply follow the Constitution. And then 90% of our problems with the federal government in our county would be solved. Thank you for the comments.
Thank you, Al. Any other public comment? Mr. Evans, would you like to answer those questions that were raised by the public?
Sure. The first, with regard to changes in the project, this is a complex, and actually I can combine the two. This is a complex process. There's a lot of environmental laws. I read off the different permits and the different regulations that we have to comply with. When we put together a budget for a project, and you'll see each time we come forward, we say that this project is covered within the current budget of the project. We put together contingencies for this specific purpose. And while we were talking, I looked at the contingency. I don't have it right here, but anyway, I looked at the contingency just to verify what's left, and there's a significant portion of that contingency left that we haven't used. Now, that's not saying we want to use that, but I think overall this project has gone very well. It's a complex process, and it's something that you're not going to go linearly from A to Z. There's going to be lots of diversions to get a project through, and we set up the budgets, we plan for that. We haven't used even half of that contingency money that's set aside for these consultants. So I think in the bigger picture of things, this project is going quite well. And if I might point out, the majority of the things that we've come back to the board on are related to the environment and the Corps of Engineers and the wetlands. It's not a broad perspective over the entire project. The rest of the project, I believe, has gone very well.
Okay.
And I would agree with Al's comments. Unfortunately, I can't take on the Corps of Engineers. So,
Steve?
Somebody suggested that we get someone who knows what they're doing. You see him before you. He's at the podium. We've got him, and I'm glad we do. And I would also want to echo if you take a look at what was happening before your arrival and the amount of overruns, exceptions, last-minute craziness, not just in a narrow area that is beyond our control, but within the things that were our control in the process, and the difference between that iteration and that which evolved from your arrival onward, I would have to say that this project is in very good hands with somebody who definitely knows what they're doing, and I just hope you don't get discouraged by suggestions that maybe we don't have that in the house.
thank you.
I would have to echo that myself, Doug. Dealing with your predecessor and dealing with you is like night and day. You understand the process, in my opinion, very well. Very well. Thank you. Any other board comments?
Just when Mr. Spellman talked about a sign of goodwill, COM should do, some gimmies. Mr. Evans said they did on the second filing. I thought I heard him say it's similar to what we just passed with CAL FIRE. It's a sign of goodwill of work that was performed. And understanding the time frame and the necessity, I will move this item.
I will second the item.
We have a second. Any other board comments before? Yes, Supervisor Spellman.
I'd like to echo Steve and Gary's comments about Mr. Evans. I've found him to be very professional, and I'm glad that we have him to be part of this process.
Thank you.
And I just, my bottom line is that I've been given the responsibility to look after the taxpayers' dollars. And so sometimes there may be uncomfortable subjects that need to be approached, and I can't shun those because it's my responsibility. I have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers, and that's no reflection on my opinion of your professionalism or how the process is proceeding. I think I've mentioned that to you before. So I just, again, want to clarify my opinion on that. As far as this motion, I will be abstaining from it. I don't doubt that what Mr. Evans says is true, that they've done some goodwill in terms of stuff that needed to be done that wasn't paid for. But without documentation of that, I can't very well give it my yes vote, although I won't vote no against it because I'm not sure that they haven't given some goodwill. So I will abstain from this measure. I'm sure it'll pass.
What kind of documentation were you looking for?
Well, Mr. Evans mentioned that there was some wetland mitigation or some things that were done. This is the third time we've revisited it. And I believe he said after the original discussion that the AECom got the memo, and there was some work that needed to be done between the first time and this being the third time. There was a second period there where there's some stuff that needed to be done and revised. And Mr. Evans said that they did that pro bono or at a discount or something like that as a goodwill effort. And I don't doubt that they have, but I don't have documentation of that, so I'm just going to abstain. Rather than say no, but I don't feel I can responsibly say yes, thinking that, there isn't something more that they could do. So I'm just going to, on this one, I'm just going to refrain and abstain.
Okay, I have a motion by Supervisor Callaway and a second by Supervisor Walensky. All in favor, say aye. And anybody voting no? Seeing no, it's abstain. One abstention.
And one absent.
And one absent. Mr. Tryon is not here. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
I want to remind the board that we will be leaving here at about 11:45 to go over to the Senior Citizen of the Year's luncheon. So we have one other item here, two items actually before noon recess, and that would be item 15, an informational briefing. A Calaveras County 2011 point-in-time homeless survey, Calaveras Works and Human Services Agency.
Good morning, I'm Kathy Hull. I'm representing Calaveras Works and Human Services Agency. And just to present the homeless survey that we did in January. I believe you all have a copy.
Yes.
And basically what it shows is we have a total of 185 homeless in our communities, 135 adults with 50 dependent children. I find it interesting too that we have 9...
Could you speak into the mic? Thank you.
We have 9 unaccompanied 18 years and younger that are homeless. Our homeless population is a population that you don't see, but they're out there. And of course at Calaveras Works we see them a lot at our door. And I'd like to introduce Beetle Barber. She is from ACCA and part of the continuum of care for Calaveras, Amador, and Tuolumne County.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board and county staff.
Good morning.
I am Beetle Barber. I'm here today as co-leader of the Central Sierra Continuum of Care. We're a planning group for homeless housing and services in Amador, Calaveras, and Tuolumne counties. We're taking a regional approach to that. As Kathy was saying, in January of each year, we do a survey of homeless persons, and I'm going to give you a few of the results from those surveys. We did this as a region, so we do have regional totals as well. 498 adults who are homeless in Amador, Calaveras, and Tuolumne, and 282 children. As Kathy mentioned, the totals in Calaveras County, 135 adults and 50 children. Another point in that, a detail, is that of those 50 children, 23 of them were ages 5 and under, and we did have one pregnant mom to be out there.
Did you count her as two?
Sorry?
Did you count her as two?
No. Okay, in 2009, we did another street survey in Calaveras, and the totals were much smaller then. And so we're kind of looking at reasons why we almost doubled the count this year. One is definitely due to the economy in general. Certainly the increase in homeless among single males. We had 50 single males who were homeless this year in 2011. So the worsening economy has had definitely an effect. And also we made a decision to include couch surfers this year. We did not do that in 2009, and we decided to do it this year because our work with your social services and nonprofits in Calaveras County convinces us that they really know who is homeless out there. They deal with them, as Kathy said, they're at the door. And so it made sense to do that. To be specific, we counted only those couch surfers who said they would not be able to stay there. That was temporary dwelling, and they had to leave within 48 hours. A couch surfer is someone who is obviously staying on a couch or in an empty room or in the basement, that kind of thing. So other highlights from the survey, and I'm just going to be giving you dry statistics. There are other people here today who'd like to talk about personal encounters they had with homelessness. The largest age group was adults from 19 to 59 years. A total of 52 were in the age group of 19 to 30, and then higher than that, 68 were 31 to 59. So they're slightly more in the older category. As Kathy mentioned, there are 9 unaccompanied youth, and as a side note, on a regional note, we counted 50 unaccompanied youth this year. We've never had anything like that count, and we really don't know why they were willing to engage with us and let us count them this year. Unaccompanied youth are younger than 18, and they're already at odds with the law by being out there alone. But as you know, they are out there alone.
Was there any indication as to common age? Was it like 15 to 17?
Ran the gamut. We interviewed a young woman in Tuolumne County who was 13.
Wow.
Gender breakdown, 83 were male, which is about 63 of the total of adults, and 50 were female, 37. And the only thing that's unusual about that is in 2009 it was almost 50-50 in Calaveras. In fact, it was 51% female and 49% male. So there's been a change, and again, we would attribute that, I think, to the worsening economy and so many single males who are homeless because they're unemployed. A lot of people ask, where do the homeless come from? Approximately 77% of the adults we surveyed said they were already living in Calaveras County when they became homeless. And 88% of them said they consider Calaveras County to be their home. And that's a trend we've observed since we started doing surveys back in 2004. Majority of individuals surveyed in Calaveras County are actual residents who have a strong connection to the community. They're not transients. Where are they sleeping? 11 of the adults surveyed were staying in an emergency homeless shelter, and that is undoubtedly the Resource Connections shelter for women and their children fleeing domestic violence. 65 people said they were sleeping on a friend's couch, but knew that they couldn't stay there. 24 said they were sleeping in their vehicles. In January of 2011, I don't know if you remember, but it would have been a very bad time to be sleeping in your car. 28 were sleeping outdoors. They were either in campgrounds or other locations. 3 of them had paid for a night in a motel. 2 were currently being evicted. They were in a rental, but they were losing it. 1 was sleeping on a church pew, and another one was sleeping in an unlocked office building, which he declined to identify. Reasons that they became homeless again this year, as in 2009, overwhelmingly, that there's just no work. There's no type of employment at all. And income-wise, that was true as well. Only 36 of the adults surveyed had a job. All the rest of them were unemployed and hardly able to pull together the odd jobs that they'd been doing before. Disabling conditions, fewer persons this year reported having a physical or medical disability, but greater numbers reported living with a diagnosed mental illness or substance abuse. And yes, homeless people who are responsible for their own homelessness by abusing substances admit that during the survey. In 2009, only 15% of the adults surveyed reported a diagnosis of mental illness. In 2011, 24% of them reported that they had that diagnosis. That's about 32 adults. Because we're also working with Calaveras County Behavioral Health on housing for this population, it's important to note that increase. Individuals with circumstances such as those require more detailed case management and assistance. Again, as I said, income, very little income among the homeless. 8 of those surveyed were veterans, 3 of them had been in active duty. And that's my report. If you have time, we would like to bring a few people up to report on individual encounters. Do you have questions for me?
Any questions on the board?
When you said most of them consider themselves Calaveras residents, I guess I couldn't find that just something that you knew. What does most mean?
88%.
It's at the bottom down here.
Was it? Did I miss that?
77.8% said they were living in Calaveras County when they became homeless, and 88.1%
I
said they
missed that.
considered Calaveras County
Thank you.
home. Yes.
That it was home sweet home.
Thank you. The only other question I had is that when I was talking to some of the people involved with doing the surveys, that they said they ran into people who didn't want to answer, so they were not counted. So where are we on that? Because, I mean, I know whenever it's passed, we have our CalWorks staff is busier than I wish they were, as I'm sure that's true in other parts of the county. So out of the 185, what is that in relation to the educated opinion of people who wouldn't respond?
I'm starting to feel confident in our numbers. We've been doing this for a couple of years now. You're right, every year there are people who absolutely refuse. They will, if you're out on the street trying to survey them, they'll yell at you and throw things at you because they don't want to be counted. And I think that they certainly have a right to their privacy and their dignity. I'm starting to feel like our numbers are correct in terms of how we should deploy our resources, if you will. I mean, these people are willing to come forward and to be counted. The guidance that we receive from the federal government is that no matter how good you are at counting, you'll only get 10%. So if we conclude there might be 1,800 people who are homeless in Calaveras County, we can only deal with the 185 who are willing to deal with us.
And we don't work through the schools?
We do, yes. The county school...
Okay, good.
The county school liaison.
I hear teachers tell me about kids they know sleeping in cars.
Right, and the county schools office has a homeless liaison who attends our meeting and is part of our planning process.
Thank you.
Any other board questions? Al, before we open it up to the public, she wanted to bring some members that were out there forward.
Hi, I'm Sammy
I'll let them
Rhodes.
speak, and then we'll open it up to the public.
I'm Sammy Rhodes from Sierra Hope, and our surveys were basically an Angels Camp. I wanted to just talk about a couple of them. Amazingly, when you talk to these people, sometimes, occasionally, you get that roller coaster when they're talking, because it could indeed be us. One gentleman, 48-year-old male, who, in response to where he was living when he became homeless, was Romania. He's from here. Met a woman, moved to Romania. Then he went to Alaska, was several years there, was on the city council, had a small business. Business went bad. Redistricting type stuff, he lost the city council position. Wife went back to Romania, he followed her. Lost the house. She wouldn't go back to him. He came back to Calaveras County because he had some distant relatives here. So I'm asking him about his education, and he was pretty intelligent, you could tell when we were talking. And he has a master's degree. And he had just got done applying at the Burger King and could hardly wait for the McDonald's to open so that he could start applying there. And last month, He came in and talked to me, and he had been sleeping on some private property fenced in with a piece of tin over him. And he was making his coffee, and he always had his jug of water to put his little fire out. But his sheriff drove by, and he was evicted from there. So he is now in a homeless shelter for 30 days, but he's still in the same situation, only now he's warm. My second one, well known around Angels Camp just because he was always a local handyman, 53 years old, and with the economy, didn't get as many jobs to do his handyman and landscaping stuff. And so he had also volunteered a lot at food pantries, churches. And so he's the one who's been sleeping on the church pew, going in at night, sleeping on the church pew. And he came in, he wouldn't tell me where he was staying. The way I know is he came in and asked me to close my door. And he said, if you don't see me for a couple weeks, would you come and look for me, because I don't want them to find me there when they come in for church. That one got to me. We haven't seen him for a couple of weeks, but I can't find him at the church. So I don't know where he is, but he's out there somewhere. This is us. My hours got cut. This is us. You. Thank you.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Denise Cloward, and I am the shelter coordinator for the ATCA Emergency Shelter in Jackson. Ironically enough, the very wonderful ending to that particular story is, Sammy and I haven't spoke, that gentleman from Romania is now my caretaker in the Amador shelter, and he is an excellent caretaker. His resume precedes what she was speaking of. He's been a police officer, he's been in the Peace Corps, and he has excellent communication skills with the residents, so that was a good ending. I was responsible for the point-in-time survey in Amador County, but I had the pleasure of interviewing some Calaveras citizens as well, and I'm also from Calaveras County. I chose this particular story because I didn't actually realize that I was in the middle of a survey until I was halfway through it. I was in the post office, digging through my mail in Mokill, complaining about my bills and how they stuffed too much stuff in my box. And the lady next to me started to tell me her story about coming up from Fresno to take care of her sick father. And she has a 10-year-old son. She chose to homeschool him so that he could have the rest of the 5 months with his grandfather, and unfortunately his grandfather had just recently passed away and lost his battle with cancer. She was staying at the Mokill Ledger, and she had 3 days left to stay in that particular hotel. She had sold all of the rest of her father's belongings to get to this point, and obviously he wasn't well off, so there was just enough money to bury him and take care of his, personal things. So this woman was working part-time in a local restaurant, looking for a second job. She told me that she was too proud to sign up for food stamps. She said she liked to go to the churches because they don't judge her as well as she thought the county might judge her. Those were her words. So I told her about our safety net services, and the good ending to this story is, I know we're almost out of time, but she called me about a month later and stated that she went ahead and followed through with contacting 2 of the churches that I had told her about in Amador County, and they were able to fund her with 2 bus passes to get her and her son back to Fresno to kind of start over and live with cousins at that point. What I learn every day in my job in the trenches of homelessness is that it can happen to any of us at any given moment, and that homeless people are just the same as we are. And so working with the homeless can be fascinating once we get past our own preconceptions. Some homeless have graduate degrees, others served with honor in the military, and still others once held high-paying jobs. Until a catastrophic illness exceeded all insurance claims, until an ugly divorce strip them of their families and their money, until they entered a spiral of drug addiction and alcoholism, until mental illness consumed their ability to function in society. I think we need to continue the work that we do. I'm very proud to work in the organization that I work for. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be brief. Krista Thompson, Behavioral Health Services. While I didn't have the privilege to participate in the count this year, I have been working pretty closely with two populations that we serve, one of which is our mental health consumers as part of our kind of consumer leadership team. And I asked them very recently, our team has now grown to about 17, and I asked them recently how many of them had ever been homeless, and all but, I believe, 2 raised their hand. So that was pretty alarming for me. They are, as a group, very passionate about the housing that we are developing, and I want to thank the board for your support in that regard. I've also had the privilege to work with our perinatal substance abuse treatment clients as well. And many of these have a dual diagnosis, so they're suffering with both mental illness and a substance abuse problem. And it's been devastating to see some of them become homeless. And I think what's even harder for me is seeing what the circumstances and the situations that some of these moms stay in order to avoid homelessness, in order to get their kids back. And so I'm grateful for the crisis center that we have, and unfortunately, it doesn't have 50 beds because we could sure use it. But there's a lot of moms out there who aren't counted because they're staying in really awful situations, bad relationships, poor living conditions. And so when we talk about housing, this is why we really need housing, and it's more than just affordable housing. When we try to help people find apartments, their aid doesn't even begin to cover the monthly rent on the least expensive apartments in our county. So these are the people who I want to speak for today, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kristen. Okay, I'll open it up to the public.
Alice Gallant, Taxpayer Association, and I'll make my comments real brief because we're running over time. Anybody ever hear about training fleas? Training fleas? Nobody? Interesting. You could take fleas, put them in a jar, and they'll hop right out. But if you screw the lid on, the fleas will jump till they hit the lid and tap, 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 tap. Pretty soon they won't be tapping very much anymore. Then you can unscrew the jar, and the fleas will only jump to the edge, to the lip of the jar. They can't jump further than that because they've been conditioned. It's a sense of expectation. We talk about wealthy people in our country. A lot of times there's envy and they're despised and they want to eat the rich. But they're rich because they're expected to be to begin with. And the other end of the spectrum, among the poor among us, some are the result of tragedy beyond their control, no doubt about it, even in the choice of husbands or wives. But to a certain extent, and maybe even a large extent, they're there because that is where their expectation is. They don't expect to get a job. They don't expect to be success in business. They don't expect to work hard. Sometimes they receive sympathy and peer approval by being there. And so I would like to see stronger participation by the private sector in this area. The churches should be more involved. Rather than let somebody sleep on a pew, they should be involved with helping these people get a grasp on life and learn that they can jump beyond the edge of the jar. And I think by that private approach, more so than government subsidy, we will be able to climb out of it. We'll never achieve the utopia of not having anybody poor, because people can choose to do that if they want to. Anyway, that's what I'd like to see happen. Maybe it'll happen in the future.
Any other public comment?
Race, Rancho Calaveras. I want to give you respect for all the folks who are working with these homeless people. It must be emotionally awful, okay? Two things I noticed prior. The school tried to get these modules away. It's sitting there. They're going to destroy it in a couple of months.
Actually, 2 weeks.
Well, whatever, okay? County does have land. I don't know how great of amenities they can offer. It would be that is there. It's almost there for the taking. And if nothing else, I'm sure that the school will cooperate with the county to give some temporary shelter. One of the central point everybody is because I hear is that because the economy is pretty abundantly kind of bad. Putting those folks into an apartment or something, that's not going to solve that problem. If they have a problem, addiction, or personal problems, putting them up in an apartment won't do it. But if you can get into someplace, a temporary shelter, you can spend all these $1,000 to study. You know it's there. But in the long run, you would be better off financially as a county, as a community, to cooperate with the school, maybe cooperate with some of these other private agencies, to at least give those folks an opportunity to take care of that, whatever bad addictions they have, or mental or emotional problems. So one of these days, eventually they can get on their feet. It's not that you want to keep them there, keep them at the stage they are in, but give them a hands up to get started, to get a better life, not to encourage them to be, because most of them, as we have said, they don't want to deal with the county. They have numbers to the county, and there's a certain badge they're going to wear because they are in the county. County's substance abuse program or whatever. But if you give them an opportunity and you have something that you're going to be destroying, that's take them out of the element. So you don't have to search for the dead body. Just give them an opportunity, someplace, a shelter, and someplace that it can be safe, that is available. Just take advantage of it. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Good morning, I'm Tanya Dawson from Valley Springs, and I'd just like to say again, at the risk of being called heartless, that it's not the government's role to be taking care of the homeless. There's charities for that, and the government should be getting out of the way of the charities and making it easier for the charities to offer things to these people instead of putting regulations and things in their way to block these things. What I think is heartless is forcing somebody to part with the fruit of their labor that they worked for, that they've put their time, energy, and talent to earn their money, and then have somebody else come and say that they don't deserve it, somebody else does, and to redistribute it to those who haven't earned it. So that's just my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Rosemary Wilson from Oak Hill. I'm not sure if I'm going to get through this without crying. People in mental health, the behavioral health services group here, and the people the CalWorks people have been conducting these surveys, have been doing a great job, and we should show more compassion. I have my bachelor's, my master's, my PhD, postdoctoral work. I've been a professional in a high-tech arena, and yet I get diagnosed with Parkinson's. I am unfortunately unable to work. I go on disability, and I am at a level of income that is 1/4 of what I was receiving and earning in 1999. It is not that people get used to, that can't jump high because they've been preconditioned or conditioned not to jump high. Maybe it has something to do with them not being able to afford food and general safety and shelter that, of course, makes them homeless in the first place. I just think we should be improving and doing more of what behavioral health and Rita Downson and her staff is trying to do when it comes to the Mental Health Services Act and the new projects that they have been introducing, and I've been a part of the Mental Health Services, the advisory board for a little while, and I just think you should be doing more for your neighbor than to be saying that we are strong, we're fit, we are fortunate, we are lucky, and we, because of that, we don't need to help others. They could well find themselves in a far worse position than I am, and a similar position to the people that have been counted, and that's only 10%. Supposedly it could be as little as 10%. I think we should have more, in general, more heart. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, bring it back to the board. This is an informational item only. It's not an action item. Is there any other board comments before we leave for lunch? Steve?
I had an interesting week last week on this very subject, and I want to tell my stories. I had a woman call who was losing her home because she had become ill. She had recently been divorced. Her husband, ex-husband, had been supporting her but was laid off from his law enforcement job in Stockton. Payments stopped, house lost, foreclosure begun. Where does she go? I had a veteran from another part of my district call and say that his water was turned off in February and things were getting a little funky in his house. He was having a hard time figuring out whether to pay water bills and re-hookup charges, food, medical costs, or his house payments, which he was barely hanging on to. He decided that if he could get enough money, he would go back to Georgia, where he once lived long ago. I had another person call. It was a family of actually probably known to our mental health services agency, at least the kids were. They had received an eviction notice that day, and I was trying to delay it so they could get their stuff out of their house, but we enforced it anyway because one hand wasn't paying attention to the other. They were calling from the street outside their house, having been locked out and wondering what to do. These folks had worked all their lives, by the way, and had recently become, in older age, disabled and unable to work, so they were living off of fixed income. I had the chance to call every charity in this county, virtually, and every church in behalf of these three. Everyone in the towns they lived in, and then I began moving out to the Salvation Army, to every agency in this county in the public sector, and every private entity that I was aware of. And I spent 2 days trying to figure out how to deal with this. And I have to say that for those of you who have a utopian view of the state of charities in this county, that you would leave people to a very sorry fate if that was the only option they had. And I would say the same thing if you were to say that the government should take care of all of this. We do not have the wherewithal, and we've cut service staff by 1/3 in one of the critical departments that used to be able to serve this population, our CalWorks. This is not a situation where we argue ideologies about what sector ought to be dealing with it. This is not a situation that any of us have faced in our lifetime unless you're very old and went through the Depression. We have the worst economy, the most serious assault on our sense of well-being economically than we've had in our lifetime. And whether we come together across those jurisdictional lines and ideological lines for that matter, will really test what kind of a people we are. These are hard things to solve. I'm pleased to say that each one of these situations has, the water is being rehooked up, the Salvation Army came up with some of it, Community Service Center came up with some of it, a church helped out, we had CalWorks step up and support one of the situations. We got the revolving loan that these supervisors initiated and through CalWorks, and that got one family into a rental that was within their ability to pay with their fixed income on disability. It cobbled together after 3 very tough days of calling everything around. Now you multiply that 3 times 600, which is our real figure out there. And you can see that if all the king's horses, all the king's men from the public and private sector and every charitable agency and goodwill citizen in this county got mobilized, we might just very barely be able to cover this need. The real question is, does it matter? Does it affect any of the rest of us? And what I will tell you is that we're all poor when we fail to come together and deal with these situations, and in the end, the cost is much greater to our society. Let me also now announce something that I was going to do in my correspondence, because the real solution here is not so much charity as opportunity. I'm announcing today that we have settled the CBD Buena Vista lawsuit, and that the cogen plant is going ahead and has posted 24 jobs ranging from laborer to engineering and plant operator and clerical and support. That goes through mother lode job training, and those will be part of both training and placement in the private sector. There are 12 positions related to this settlement that are going into the forest jobs, and those are also available through mother lode job training. And there's a third area of hiring in my district, 4 jobs that are going to be going to Railroad Flats School and West Point Elementary that will be in an enrichment program and are available to seniors to apply, people on fixed incomes and who are designed to allow kids to have a whole lot more exposure to extracurricular learning. There'll be a sports program, an arts program, a construction trades program, and a garden growing and home economics program within that. So if people are interested in any of those, my hope is that those of you who know people who have skills, are unemployed, are homeless, get down to mother lode job training, apply for these things, because the private contractors that are doing the hiring have asked them to help find people that they can employ. I really hope that we'll do better than this kind of conversation back and forth, that this is a serious enough thing for all of us to find common cause. Let's just get on with it. Let's try to let's put our work where our mouth is. Let's stop talking about what abstract group of people might help out and see whether we can make the calls and apply it to real life situations here in our county.
Any other comments? Yes, Supervisor Spellman.
I'm thankful for people that brought this forward today, and as always, this is something that really tugs at my heartstrings. I understand all sides of the issues. That's not to say I have a complete understanding, because I cannot empathize by the very definition of the word, because I have never been homeless. But I have, at one point in my life, spent 2 years in the service of others doing missionary work in and around the city of Philadelphia, which is a very large urban area. And I did come in contact with and participated in a lot of the services that were mentioned here today. So I am aware of those things that exist. And even though we are not in an urban area, I would be the first one to stand with you in admitting that that doesn't mean we have less of a problem in terms of the actual percentage of people. And it's very hard to quantify, as you mentioned, the exact numbers. But taking into account those people who were willing to participate and using that number to extrapolate to where the possible true number could be, that's quite astounding to think about in terms of what the actual number could be. a couple things that I wanted to make comment on. In the analysis that was given here from the study, one of the things that stuck out in my mind was under the reasons people became homeless, 39.3% of the people stated the reason why they became homeless because they couldn't pay for their rent or their mortgage. Now, that doesn't mean that they're unemployed, because there's a separate number for unemployed. 57.8% said it had to do because they were unemployed. So that means these people are saying to the surveyor that they are not unemployed. So that means whatever type of employment they have, whether it's landscaping part-time or working part-time, whatever that may be, basically 40% of these people who are homeless do have work of some sort, just not enough to meet their needs to pay for rent. And that, to me, is extremely detrimental. There was testimony given about people who are willing to work. Obviously, these people are willing to work. They can't find the work in the type and quality that would provide them with enough income to be able to pay for rent. At one point in my life, I'm no longer in that situation, but at one point in my life, I was an entrepreneurial person, and I owned about a half a dozen rental properties, of which I've all divested myself of at this point in my life. But I keep track of those numbers in terms of trying to get a good analysis of where our county is at when you pick up the paper. How many places do you see for rent under $1,000 a month? Not many. And the ones that are go fairly quickly. And there's kind of beating each other up trying to get them. I know of a person personally that's a friend of mine who works full-time in Amador County, but his wage is not minimum wage. It's $10 an hour. But when you multiply 40 hours, that $10 an hour, that's $1,600 a month, gross. Then you take out the taxes, the gas money for travel from Calaveras to Amador County. This person has a wife and kids, and the money that he makes from that job is just enough to pay for the rent as it is today. That means absolutely no money for food, no money for if his car breaks down, no money for water, gas bill, nothing. He does other things on the side for cash or whatever, to try to supplement what he needs to make his family budget work. So I would second what Supervisor Walensky said, that we need not focus on ideologies. We need to focus on what it actually exists. What exists is that the system has, in the past, it now has, and always will have, a small percentage of people who skim off the goodwill of others. However, we can't discount the whole lot as people who are just taking advantage of the system. It's easy to say, but it's not true. It's just not. It's just not true. I'd like to see this board and other members of our staff here in the county focus on bringing jobs to this area that allow people a working wage. Even $10 an hour is not enough working full-time to even pay for the rent, hardly, for a house that would be suitable for a family. I'm talking about a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, which would be required if you had a husband, a wife, and more than 2 kids or more. And you can't get a house like that to rent for $1,200 or less, hardly. It just doesn't exist. I've watched it for years. Okay. The other thing I wanted to touch on here was that previously we had Mrs. Sawicki and other people came before the board and asked for approval for money for basically marketing of food stamps and those type of things. At that time, I expressed my disheartening towards where that money was being spent. What I said was I would like to see that money, instead of being spent, because she said the number of people in the last 2 years or 3 years, because the economy had doubled on the rolls of food stamps. So I used that and said, well, obviously if the number's doubled, these people are not having a hard time finding out where they need to go to get it. If they need to go get it, they talk to friends, family, whoever, organizations, and they find it. And one of the things that this survey brought up was that under the category of services needed but unable to get, only 13.3% of those surveyed said that they needed food stamps but weren't able to get them. So that means at the opposite end, 86.7% of the people surveyed said they either were getting or could get, if they needed to, food stamps. So the fact that we gave $124,000 just last month for people to do outreach to find out how many people were not being able to utilize food stamps in this county. I would have liked to have seen, I said it then, and I'll say it again today, I would have liked to have seen that $124,000 go towards providing some permanent housing. Or you know what I'm saying? Something that's a capital improvement that's going to be ongoing. And I want to thank Mr. Race. You're brilliant. Just for the record. I'm sure I knew you would say that. What Mr. Race was referring to is Calaveras Unified School District has in its possession 6 classroom-size portable buildings, of which in about 2 weeks to 3 weeks maximum, they are going to be bulldozed, disassembled, and hauled away as scrap by a recycler. Mark Campbell, the superintendent of Calaveras Unified School District, has made those buildings available to me, not only to me, but he's made it available to me, and I've asked if they could be used possibly for a library in Copperopolis, maybe for other things that they could be used for. The school district's been hanging on to them for quite some time. They really need to get rid of them. If there was somebody that was willing to go and get those buildings, that's all the school district asks. They're free for the taking for any organization that has a need and has the ability to go and get them. Okay? So if it is that you know of some place where those could be located and used as a shelter, temporary or otherwise, for people who may be sleeping out under the stars, while that may not be a problem now, it is a problem in January. And those buildings are only available until the first week of June, maybe second week of June. And if you would like some help, if you think that you have a place that you could put those buildings and you need help getting them from point A to point B, I would be more than willing to help in that effort. So please contact me if that's of interest to anybody in your organizations. It's a start. It's something.
Rita, do you have anything to add?
Well, yeah, we need to be respectful to the seniors that we're going to the luncheon for them. I just want to say, like Steve, last week I was involved with a homeless situation. It was snowing. I know he wasn't counted, and we had some community members helping out, but due to weather, we needed to reach beyond sleeping in a church and on a sofa, and CalWorks stepped up to the plate to help out. This is not somebody who does not have an expectation of making better for himself. It's just circumstances at this point in time. So to say that people don't have expectations is not true. I've gone to the mental health meetings, to your living room, to the graduation ceremonies in behavioral health, to work that probation department's doing. There are great expectations among the clients of these agencies. If the churches, there's nothing stopping the churches or private charities in Calaveras from stepping up. The churches I work with in Ebbets Pass do step up. I know they do in Steve's area too, and I'm sure in the rest of the county.
They do.
So it's just that the demand is greater than what a local institution, i.e. church or private charity, can do. So, out of just respect for where we need to go, Mr. Chair, I think we should close this down.
Yes, it's now 12:15. I think we're a little bit late, so in the interest of time, we will revisit. We will be back here at 2:15. We will revisit item 16 at that time, and then we will go into a study session. Right now, we will break for the noon recess.